Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Generations Apart. I'm Jay.
And I'm Robbie.
And on today's episode, we're taking a look at everything that Apple announced at its September keynote, including the Apple Watch Series 9 and the latest line of iPhones coming very soon. But before we get into that, Robbie, what's new with you this week?
Well, this week I've been struggling a bit. My legs are really sore, and the reason is last Sunday I did the Great North Run in Newcastle, northeast of England, and you can see my time there. Not the quickest of times. I did it. It's a half marathon, the world's biggest half marathon. It has 60,000 people who run it every year, and I got it in 2 hours 33.
Well done.
So yeah. I'm really sore. In fact, I was in London all week as well, doing a ton of walking around, which actually I think helped. But yeah, I've done something to my foot today, just when I'm actually supposed to be relaxing. So God knows what's happened.
It's fair to say that you took that on under some serious weather conditions. It's been ridiculously warm, or had been, in the UK in the build-up. So you know, not a time to be sniffed at a half marathon in those conditions. Fair play to you.
Yeah, it was quite dramatic, rather, because we had really hot at the start, and at the start you're waiting for ages before you set off running. So we were just stood in the heat and just getting all hot and sweaty and gross before even running. And then when we set off, it was fine. It was still really hot, but then it cooled off by the end. And then once we'd finished, a crazy thunderstorm came and flooded the streets, and it took us 4 hours to get home because of the floods, like flash floods in South Shields. It was crazy.
Obviously, and a few people who listen will know that I was meant to be running that with you had I not torn my calf over the summer. But when you told me about the traffic problems, I'll be honest, I was a little bit grateful that hadn't impacted me, because I'd have had a much longer drive home, and that would have really had a knock-on effect to my already long journey back from the north of England. But yeah, we're all done. 2 hours 33 is a good time. And you're going to do it again next year? I think you suggested you might be.
I've put myself down.
Still thinking doing that? Yeah.
In a twisted, sadistic way. I've put myself down for the updates for next year. Yeah.
Well, I've deferred my place, so I will hopefully, injuries permitting, be there next year. So we'll see if we can both better that time when we take it on in 2024.
Yeah, hope for better weather.
Cool.
What about you? What's happening with you this week?
So I did a very quick YouTube short on this. So if you're following us on YouTube, then you'll have seen this. If you're not, then why not? Go and subscribe. Go and have a look at us over there. You can see our handsome faces and all the bright colour that we put into these episodes. But I'm going to show you this, but I'll also describe it for those listening on audio. I picked up this week, in anticipation of Spiderman 2 on the PlayStation 5, the custom controller that was released. So it's a custom PS5 controller. It's predominantly black with the Spiderman logo straight through the middle. And then there's this sort of red down the one side, and it's meant to look like the symbiote is kind of taking over Spider-Man, as Venom is going to be a big part of this one. I'm really excited. We had the Sony State of Play just last week. Wasn't a huge amount shown, to be honest, that we didn't already know about, but they did do an extended look at Spider-Man, which got me further excited. And then from what I'm hearing from sort of journalists who've had a chance to go hands-on with it, they're all saying things like the best superhero game ever made, potentially. So high expectations. There's talk of maybe Game of the Year.
Wow.
I've got it on pre-order. Comes out in October. So I'll make sure we'll do some streaming, perhaps, Robbie, and you can kind of quiz me as I'm playing, or we can talk about it on the podcast as well if people are interested in hearing a bit more about that game specifically. But I'm a big fan. Always have been a big Marvel fan, big Spidey fan. I wanted the plates for the PS5.
Yeah, I saw those.
But they may have been such limited supply, and the scalpers had them within kind of minutes of them going live. In some ways, I'm grateful, though, because as you can probably tell for those watching on YouTube, I've had a bit of a move around in the office, and my PS5 is wall mounted. And as it turns out, the way my PS5 is wall mounted, the nice red and black side of the PlayStation would have been facing the wall, and the black side, which is the rear, would be the only thing you'd see had I bought them anyway. So maybe I've been spared some embarrassment there, but that's what's new for me anyway this week.
Very sharp looking controller. Yeah. I like it. Black and red's one of my favourite colours anyway.
I always question why people bothered with custom controllers before, and then in the current console generation, I've bought more than I've ever bought. I've never bought custom controllers before.
Haven't you got the Starfield one as well that we chat about?
Yeah, I got the Starfield one for the Xbox One. I've also got the 20th anniversary of Xbox controller that they made, which is also for the Series X. So I've got two custom controllers now for the Series X, and this one for the PS5. I did buy, actually, tell a slight lie, for the PS4, but I bought it because I genuinely needed a second controller, which was the anniversary of the PlayStation, the 20th anniversary of PlayStation, and they did the PS4 controller in the original grey, yeah, that sort of light grey that the original PlayStation 1 came in, which was quite funky. So yeah, I'm maybe starting to creep into the custom, or the collectible controllers world.
Yeah,
expensive, kind of pointless. Trying not to get too suckered into it, but
you'll never be short of controllers to use, though, will you?
No, this is true. Spider-Man is a big favourite of mine, though, as a game and as a franchise. Always loved Spider-Man. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm pretty pleased with it. Anyway, that's not what we're here for. Let's get straight into the Apple Keynote. So last week, and we're always a little bit behind the times here when we release our podcast, unfortunately. It's just the way things tend to fall.
Just all the conferences came falling at once as well.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
about 3 in a week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Apple did their keynote. It's their usual iPhone event, and Apple Watch as it is now. I think they run the two together, although I don't think that's always the case from memory. But anyway, we had updates to the Apple Watch, updates to the iPhones. So we're going to go through those today. I guess kind of share our thoughts, pick out the things that struck us, and just discuss how the keynote went, really. So it was 90 minutes. I watched it cover to cover. I know you have as well, Robin. We've both got notes. So should we just dive straight in and start unpacking it?
Yeah, bring it on.
So they opened with, as they often do, with a nice video. This one was all about people wishing each other happy birthday via Apple products, funnily enough, whether it was on FaceTime or a text message coming through on the watch. And it's one of these videos that kind of unraveled as you watched it. I wondered where they were going with it. And actually, I wasn't expecting the direction it went in, which was ultimately these were people in the video who had second chance at life, who were experiencing a birthday following a life event that may well have taken their life had it not been for their Apple tech. At least that's the story that was being woven. So whether that was being saved by the Apple Watch detecting irregular rhythms in the heart, there was crash detection was talked about within cars. But I thought it was just a really nice video, only very short, just highly stylized as Apple videos often are, very well put together, and a nice example of how their tech is doing more than just kind of enabling social influencing and whatever else, generally saving lives. So I thought that was a really nice video and a nice way to start the event.
Yeah, I'd agree. It was quite a cool video. It's not that I don't think this is the first time they've bragged about this stuff. They've definitely brought it up in previous conferences and stuff. I also know that they get quite a bit of criticism as well, I think, for the sheer amount of false alarms that people get. But it's on the other side of the argument. You'd rather go in and check out a false alarm and be wrong than it be missed in the actual health data as well. Because I know it can be quite sensitive, the watch, for stuff like this. And it can cause... I think the criticism you see is that it causes a generation of hypochondriacs, constantly checking their health metrics, and if it's even slightly off, then they'll go to the doctors, and the amount of doctor appointments may increase over time, things like that. But you'd much rather be healthier and saved, which I think is that's what I was trying to get across in the video, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree. And it's worth saying there is a whole load of negatives that you could pull from this, if that's the way you're inclined. I'm an Apple fanboy, so Robbie, I'm going to be the eternal optimist.
I'm the devil's advocate on this one, then.
Generally speaking, but I get it. There's always a negative to be sought, but I genuinely thought that was a nice way to start, and I do think that for all of Apple's faults, they do focus in on these sorts of things and these sorts of issues more, and we'll talk about this again later on when we talk about the environment and their sort of Apple 2030 goals, which they've also come in for a lot of stick for. But nice way to start. Then we got into the tech. We didn't go Apple Watch and iPhone immediately. They talked a little bit about Mac, MacBook, and Vision Pro. So they were just touching on some of the excitement and enthusiasm for the products. Marcus Brownlee got a call out, which I noticed he was pretty pleased with. And they talked about how he'd reviewed the MacBook, the new 15-inch MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And they just basically sort of said how popular they'd been and how well received it had been, and the excitement and what they'd seen from developers in the Vision Pro space, which is exciting as well.
Not just Marquez that was excited about that. I've seen lots of buzz in the YouTube community generally about that. It's the first time I think Apple's referenced a YouTuber with their feedback and brought it to the forefront of the audience, whereas typically they'd reference mainstream media around their reviews of things. But that's the first time really that it's highlighted the power of YouTubers and their actual contributions to the feedback and narrative of this tech as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I mean, I know Marcus is particularly high profile, and I think from a sort of values perspective, he aligns very well with Apple. His style, his approach is very well aligned with Apple as well. And of course, he's a big user of Apple products, which he makes no bones about. But yeah, it was great little opening. Then we started to get into the meat of it, and I'll be honest, I was here for the iPhone, and we'll talk about that later on. So
I think everyone was, the September event, everyone was just waiting for the iPhone.
Yeah, having bought the Ultra last year, I wasn't really bothered about the Apple Watch because what I didn't want to see was any major upgrades to the watch I already own, which would pee me off. But also, I'm not bothered about the Series 9. But we'll run through it anyway, because I know there may be some people listening who are perhaps due an upgrade or are waiting to buy a new Apple Watch. So Series 9 is the latest version now. Broadly similar in many ways to the previous device. It's now got the S9 chip, which they said had been redesigned inside and out to help them achieve all sorts of new things around speed and processing power. They talked about machine learning tasks being twice as fast as on previous devices, allowing it to do more on device. So things like your Siri requests were now processed entirely on device. Dictation was more accurate. It was also allowing Siri to be integrated with the health data. And also interact with health data now. And then things like name drop, which is coming to iOS 17, was also confirmed as being something you'd now be able to do with the watch, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I wasn't clear if that was specifically this new watch, because I know they also got a near field communication update, like the NFC chip inside also got an update. So I'm assuming that's what's enabling that, but
it's really hard to tell, isn't it? Because this is a kind of a theme throughout. There are features that they show and you go, well, is that unique to this device? Is that something that now all the devices can do? So yeah, we'll try and pick that out where we can. I'm still a little unclear on some of them.
Yeah.
And that is one of the ones I'm unclear on, to be honest. I don't know if that's coming to all
though.
Devices. Yeah, they also talked about Apple Watch and HomePod working together now, too, which also due to that near field communication. Again, I'd like to know if that is going to go in any way backwards. The Ultra at least, because have a HomePod, that'd be pretty cool. If not, then so be it. They talked about new doubling the brightness from the Series 8 to 2,000 nits, and also taking it down to as low as 1 nit for kind of nighttime viewing, which is pretty good. The thing that I think got me most excited or most interested, or at least the thing that made me go, that's cool, was the double tap feature, which is a new gesture they've introduced, which is a new way to control your watch with only one hand, at least assuming the other hand is busy. So it has to be the hand that is wearing the watch. And what I thought was really impressive about it is that it's using power of the new chip, the sensors in the watch, and it's basically reading microscopic changes in the blood flow in your wrists to recognize when you perform the gesture of a double tap or almost like a double pinch.
Yes.
For those on camera, I'm kind of doing it on screen here, but you can see this over on the website. And it allows you to do all sorts of things that you might otherwise do, with your hand. So clicking the wheels, sort of jogging through selections. It's more of a selection tool.
Yes.
But you could answer a call, you could acknowledge an alarm, all those sorts of things, assuming the other hand is not able to support you with that.
Yeah.
And I think that was really impressive. And if nothing else, just because I thought, what a really cool implementation of technology.
Yeah.
It's funny. Particularly need it, but I thought it was cool.
It's funny, Marquez Brownlee mentioned in his video, and I've never related so much in my life, but he often uses his nose to tap things on his watch. I don't know if you do the same, if there's like a timer and you've got your hands full. I just nose my watch. So I suppose it's that kind of use case where you'd if you've got your hand free, but only the hand that's wearing the watch, you'd be able to do the tappy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did make a note of the things they said. So answering calls, ending calls, controlling the primary button in any app, launching the Smart Stack, and a variety of other things. I just thought it was really fascinating what they've done there. It is entirely locked to the new Series 9 and Ultra 2 because of the S9 chip. However, there's a load of stuff online from sort of popular Apple websites and others saying that a degree of this can be achieved on your current device using the accessibility functions. I haven't tried it.
I was going to say, because this isn't actually a new feature. This exact feature has been available under the accessibility settings on earlier devices already. And so this is probably one of the things that they're getting the most criticism about, trying to lock this feature specifically to the S9 because it's been available on other devices through the accessibility settings. I think that the only thing that could be potentially different is how accurate and consistent it is with the new device. But even then, locking something like that to the new device just seems a bit like Apple always gets criticisms for, especially when it's an iterative change, a bit like this, where there's not a whole lot that's changed. There's always one thing that they try and use to, encourage people to get the new device. With the iPads in the last 2 generations, it was that hover feature with the pen, very small feature that's definitely like possible in software, but they're claiming it's like a hardware thing instead that you can only achieve in the new devices. It feels very much like this. It's clearly possible on other devices. Perhaps the reliability is better, but it feels a bit like earlier device owners are being cheated from this feature.
Yeah, I got to be honest. Like I said, I own the Ultra, and my first thought was surely, if the Ultra must have the processing power to be able to do this. But I'm not working at Apple. I don't know the guts of these things and what can and can't be achieved. It does feel a little bit like perhaps something like this could be opened up to other devices. One thing I will say is that they are very funny about promoting these things as sort of standard ways to interact, unless they are confident that it's going to be near as damn it 100% reliable.
Yeah.
And if there was or is a lack of reliability due to the processing power or whatever it might be of previous devices, perhaps that's why they're not pushing it too hard. But I get what you're saying, and I know that it's not the first time where features have been kind of locked to a device where you go, surely that's just software. I think the iPhone 12 Pro, the iPhone 13 Pro, they brought in it was the fake bokeh effect, that sort of that lens effect. They took it from photos to video, and that wasn't available in the 12. And I thought surely there isn't that much difference in the processing power of the hardware that means that only works on that device and not the previous. But anyway, we don't know for sure.
The other thing I liked about that pinch feature is that it's kind of similar to how you interact with the Vision Pro. And if you saw that, there's a few people who mentioned that pinching is how you would click on an app or click on something with the Vision Pro. And I suppose it's just kind of introducing it into another area of their ecosystem. You'd imagine that anyone who's going to have a Apple Vision Pro is going to have a watch already anyway. So I
wonder whether the watch also becomes part of the reliability factor there, whether if you do use your watch wrist as your primary selection wrist. Although I do wear my watch on the left, which is where a lot of people wear their watch, and I would interact with my right. But anyway, who knows? To be honest, that was about all I took notes on in terms of the watch, because there really wasn't much more to say. There were some new colours and straps and stainless steel varieties. The Ultra just basically had the S9 chip and the double tap. I don't think I missed anything else.
3000 nits of brightness, so again,
slight increase on the screen. Yeah. But beyond that, nothing that jumped out and said upgrade. It was kind of I'm cool personally, quite comfortable where I am for now, which I'm pleased about, because I don't want to be upgrading my watch every year.
No, that's
too
fair.
Expensive.
Yeah, I think watches out of all the devices is one. Watches, and I think a lot of the bigger devices, watches and the bigger devices, I don't think need upgrading every year, but they do try and encourage, I think, at least the mobile devices to upgrade more regularly or have something to separate it. But I do agree, the watches this year, I'm always looking when they release the watches. I'm always looking for increased battery life, because I think it's a big thing with the watches. I know obviously the Ultra's got an amazing battery life, but the normal devices, not great. I'd say you get like a day and a half. Whereas, you'd quite like... You
don't get much more than that from an Ultra. Ultra will run you about 2 days with reasonable use, and then you'll probably need to charge it before you go to bed, or overnight, ready for the next day.
Yeah.
So you get about 48 hours out of the Ultra, or at least I do, based on my usage. But because I've got a fast charger, and we're going off tangent here, I find that my sort of routine is now, rather than taking it off at bedtime and putting it on in the morning, I will now wear it throughout. Sleep in it, and that's quite useful if you wake up in the night. Simple things like checking the time without disturbing the house is quite good. But I can charge it now when jumping in the shower and sort of getting ready in the morning, and it will put more than enough juice in to at least run that day, if not fully recharge it. So I actually find that has become a combination of the watch and the fast charger.
Yeah.
Better battery life and the fast charger has become a really good way for me to use my Ultra. But
yeah, it's the same workflow as me. I've got like a fast charger that sits next to me on my desk. So whenever I'm not using my watch, or I'm sat down for like half an hour, it'll just charge up, it is quite good. I think the fast charging capabilities, it definitely makes up for the battery life. I did really like the new NFC thing. They added a feature, I don't know if you mentioned as well, which was the ability to locate your phone just as you would with an AirTag from your phone as well.
Yeah.
So it actually tells you a location of the phone, like the hot or colder kind of simulator on your watch as well, so you can see how close you are. which is, I suppose, better than GPS because it's a bit more accurate and it brings you much closer. And that's the new NFC chip that I think helps you do that, which you wouldn't be able to do on earlier devices.
It's making the watch more independent, isn't it? It's a couple of steps further forward with the power and the ML and the Siri stuff and things like the NFC chip. It's meaning that it can operate more independently than perhaps previously with the phone. It's getting ever less reliant on being tethered to do the sort of things you would want it to do, which is great. And as you said, you lose your phone, really helpful.
Which I do all the time.
So that was kind of it for Apple Watch, unless you picked anything up. I thought it was fairly run-of-the-mill, pretty straightforward upgrade. Nothing to get too excited about, but if you've been waiting for an upgrade and you're ready to go, a perfectly competent watch. Still going to be one of the best smartwatches out there. It's just not a massive leap forward if you've got a more recent version.
I think that's right. I'm excited for when they start making bigger leaps with the watch. I think the design needs updating now as well, especially for the base, the normal model. Sorry, not the Ultra, but yeah, and battery life would be cool. But yeah, nothing really much to shout about. The brightness actually is quite good because I think the 2000 nits brings it up to what the Ultra was last year. So yeah, I don't know if that's important to people.
That's normally the way, isn't it? Though you'll see that we'll probably discuss this in a minute, but it's the same with the phones. You're quite often now seeing the Pro model, the hardware trickle down to the next generation of the base model, and I think the Ultra represents that for the watch. It's their equivalent of a Pro, and I think that will get some of the more exciting hardware that will then trickle down to the standard device the following year. Likewise, the phones seem to be doing the same. I think that's just the way they're going to go, isn't it? But anyway, so Apple Watch Series S9 chip, Series 9, small upgrades, but some nice to haves there if you're looking to move forward. They then moved on to something that has been surprisingly controversial, which was the skit they did around their meeting with Mother Nature. And in the video, to sort of bring it together very quickly, and you can see you're showing it there for those who are watching on YouTube. It's definitely worth a watch. I really liked it. I'm going to say it now. I thought it was funny. I thought it was interesting. It was a really clever way to tell the story to me about their carbon goals and how they're achieving some of those. Certainly more exciting than someone presenting me a PowerPoint with some stats on, which frankly is how this stuff is normally presented. So from that perspective, I really liked it. I thought it was funny. But there has been some criticism around it online. Some people have called it cringe. Others have kind of had a go at them for even talking about this stuff. So Robbie, where do you stand on this video?
It was pretty cringy. Not gonna lie. I mean, it's definitely one of the higher production videos I've seen them do. It felt like a scene from a well-produced TV show or movie, and they even had a proper actress. I don't know what I've seen.
They're pretty good at that, though, aren't they? I guess just to point out now that Apple have got quite a bit of experience in producing high-quality TV shows.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it was. Some of the jokes were quite funny, and you can tell that they're all actors apart from Tim.
Who I thought did a very good job, especially the stare down at the end when he stares down Mother Nature about their last kind of standoff.
Oh,
I thought it was quite good.
Do you think? Okay, yeah. I'll skip to the standoff so you can see the little.
You say they're all actors. I don't think the lady.
Oh, sorry, no, the eco lady wasn't. No, she was.
Yeah, because she did come on and present later on.
Mother Nature was. I've seen her in
Mother Nature's definitely an actress. Do you know what? Like, are they the only people doing this stuff? No, they're not. Are they probably one of the furthest forward? I think they probably are.
Yeah.
And I think what I really like, or where I really appreciate this, is that they have got a global audience, huge audience watching this event, and knowing this would get shared. What a platform to sort of focus in on the importance of this stuff, whether you think it's a little bit sort of self-gratifying or whatever you want to call it.
Pat themselves on the back,
yeah, a little bit. But to be fair as well, if what they are saying they've done is true, they've also achieved some really impressive stuff, and they're doing something about it. I'm sure there's a load of stuff gone in there in terms of how they fudge the numbers and how they make this stuff look.
Apparently not. Apparently not with Apple. A lot of the times, the way that
it's more the carbon neutral side of their products. That's the bit that I'm like, they're doing a hell of a lot to offset what they're doing, but they're doing it.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that a lot of companies, they tend to buy like carbon offsetting credits and things like that. But I don't think Apple actually do. I think a lot of what they've put here is quite like legit in terms of how they power their stores and the materials that they use. So actually, it was for me quite a cringy video, but I was also like seriously impressed with their efforts, and I think they're ahead of their schedule to become carbon neutral. And
They are by 2030.
Mhm.
But what's interesting is, so to my point at the beginning, yes, it was a well-produced video. Okay, you might have thought the acting was a little bit cringy. I thought Tim Cook was, for a CEO, was pretty good actually. But had they presented it in the traditional way and given you some glossy slides with these numbers on, or some sort of cheesy B-roll of trees being planted in a rainforest or something like that while they spouted stats and numbers at you, no one would have cared. No one would have batted an eyelid. You'd have just gone, whatever.
True.
Instead, they created a story. They created a narrative. They tried to make it funny. Whether you found it funny or not, it's entirely subjective. It's your choice. But they also made something that people are talking about, for right or wrong.
Yeah.
That video is getting shared. Now, if you are one of the naysayers who shares it and goes, "Oh, this is cringe and horrible,"
still sharing it.
But you've shared it, and someone might watch that and go, "Oh, I disagree. I actually quite like that. I didn't know Apple were doing that. I might now go and buy myself an iPhone because this stuff's important to me."
Mm-hmm.
So actually sharing it is kind of counterproductive if you didn't like it, because all you're doing really is giving other people an opportunity to see something they might not otherwise have seen. But equally, I mean, I'll be honest, I put it out there and shared it on LinkedIn. Someone had shared it and I saw it and thought, yeah, I'm going to amplify that because I think it's a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with the negativity. I would rather see it and hear about it and see the positive stuff that's being done and hope that someone like Apple and the size they are can influence others. So I am pro it. I liked it. I'd like to see more of it. I'd rather have that, like I said, than stats. Do that over a presentation all day long.
Yeah, true.
If you must include it.
Yeah, give them credit. It is really impressive what they're doing. And yeah, as you say, such a big company, you'd hope it would influence other companies as well, because they're really the kind of first company to do this. But there's a few things that they mentioned there. I don't know if you wrote down any of the specifics of what they're doing. Like,
I didn't. I just enjoyed it, to be honest.
Yeah. So things like all of their stores are kind of powered by green energy, renewable energy now. They're using materials that are, I think, 100% recyclable. So 100%, 100% recycled materials is what they're using for that. I think their metals, and also their fibers and things for the watch straps and stuff. They've also stopped leather.
They've stopped doing leather. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say that, which I am. My first reaction was, oh no, but I really like my leather iPhone case.
I wrote it in my notes. I was like, what's Jay going to say? Because he loves his leather case on his phone.
But then I thought, you know what? I completely get why they've done it, and cool. Yeah. Like, actually, I'll give the new sort of woven microfiber thing a go.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my initial reaction was, oh, but I really like my leather accessories, and then I thought, but actually, you don't need.
There's more important things, I guess.
Yeah, like it wasn't like I went into some sort of rage and felt the need to kind of rant on social media. How dare they strip me of my leather cases? Not at all. No, I think it's absolutely fair. Makes perfect sense. And if you're given everything that and the context I'd set before, absolutely fair play.
Yeah.
So, we move on to the phones.
Yes. Yeah.
So iPhone 15 we're now on, and they started off with the kind of entry. I'm going to call it the base model. I don't know what you call it, or the standard model. I guess it's the standard iPhone 15. And I say that because I've been in the Pro cycle now since would have been the X. Which is the first time they really deviated from having a standard model and something fancier. But the iPhone 15, handful of things that they mentioned, but there's quite a bit to unpack. So I'll start with the quick stuff. Dynamic Island has moved over from the Pro now, and that's the standard. They mentioned the Super Retina XDR display with thinner borders and supporting Dolby Vision. Again, two sizes, no difference here, I don't think, 6.1 and 6.7 inches in the standard and the Plus.
Yep.
The body is very similar looking, but it's now got a slight contoured edge. Comes in 5 new colours. One of the things that did come up is that it's easier to repair, which I think, and cheaper to repair. And I think I saw on Twitter today, I don't know how true this is, so pinch of salt this, but they posted something along the lines of the iPhone 14 Pro, I'll use the Pro as an example, had a £499 repair cost if the back was damaged. Whereas the new iPhone 15 Pro's repair cost for the back is now £179.
Wow.
They're significantly cheaper because of the way they've re-engineered the chassis. They mentioned the recycle benefits. I think they mentioned this was going to have was it either 100%? I think I've made a note of this. Either 100% recycled battery or something close to recycled cobalt in the battery,
which is a big thing. Cobalt mining in the industry is quite damaging to the environment, also quite tragic in some ways.
Yeah. They mentioned the camera upgrade. So the 48 megapixel main cam has moved over from the Pro into this with a quad pixel sensor. They said that in low light, I think 24 megapixels was kind of the standard, and it used computational photography, which they touched on a few times, to create next generation portraits. They talked about machine learning being used to capture rich depth information automatically, and then allowing you, so if you didn't remember to use portrait mode at the point of taking the picture, you could still create the portrait effect after the fact, because the ML would recognize the fact that you'd got people in the picture. They also mentioned focus and depth control, which I thought was really cool, and the ability to change the focal point after the picture is taken.
Yep.
Which I can see is what you're showing on screen now.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned a few other bits about the camera, and nothing that sort of particularly jumped out at me. All sort of nice uplifts. They touched on the performance chip, the A16 Bionic, being brought over from the Pro as well. They talked about new connectivity through a new ultra wideband chip, allowing device connectivity across a 3 times larger distance.
Yeah.
So don't quite know what that's all about. They also then mentioned the satellite emergency connectivity, which is something they had announced with the Ultra watch and the phones back in the last generation. That's now been extended to 14 new countries, including a good chunk of Europe and the UK. And then became, I guess, the most controversial bit in terms of what I'd written down, which was the speed at which they glossed over the USB-C replacing the Lightning connector. Didn't really get into it too much here, other than to mention the fact that you could now use that device to charge other devices, like your AirPods Pro or your AirPods, etc., or another iPhone. And I should say that I've also since seen today that apparently the way that's going to work is that if you're going USB-C to USB-C, so 2 phones with both USB-C ports, the higher battery phone will charge the lower battery.
Oh, cool.
However, if you go from USB-C to Lightning, then the USB-C phone will always be the one providing power to the other device.
Interesting.
So that's quite interesting. And then MagSafe, they mentioned. I thought that was already in the 14s, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm confusing that with the Pro. And then finally, they mentioned the price, which
MagSafe is already in the.
Yeah, they mentioned it, and the way they mentioned it made it sound new. And then, you know what we said earlier about clever messaging and not being quite sure. And I was like, is that something that's always been there? Well, I assumed it had, and it's in my 12 Pro. I assumed it had made its way to the standard line.
I think it's in my work phone. I think is an iPhone 12, and I'm pretty sure that has MagSafe.
It probably has. And like I said, I wasn't sure, and I made the note as a bit of a question mark. Is that new or not? Have I just never realised?
Mm-hmm.
And then they finished with price, which was $799 for the standard and $899 for the Plus.
Yes.
So what did you make of the 15?
Yeah, I mean it's as we discussed with the watch, isn't it? It's taken the Ultra features of last year and bringing them down to the iPhone, which they do, every year. The Pro features from last year come down to the iPhone, really. I think the biggest changes with that were the 48 megapixel camera now being brought down to the iPhone 15. But I did see, I took quite a few notes on the computational photography, which is an update across both the 15 and the 15 Pro. So that instead of binning 48 megapixel photos down to 12 megabytes, I think of what it usually is, it's now 24, not megabytes, megapixels. It's now 24 megapixels. Yep. So that you'll get sharper images from this 48 megapixel sensor in both the 15 and the 15 Pro. But I think that's quite a cool, it's a really detailed camera to bring to the normal range. And the portrait mode updates I think was also really cool. I'm terrible for remembering to put on portrait mode, so the fact that you can do that after the fact is really, really useful. Especially the focusing as well, to change where you're focusing on. It is actually really clever the way they take their photos. They must be doing a bunch of different photos at the same time and then layering them on top of each other so you can just choose, where you want to go. And I know they do that for the lighting, for example. They take, really high lighting shots and really low lighting shots and then combine them together to have like a great HDR photo. So yeah, just bringing that to the normal iPhone is really cool. Other things that they mentioned, you mentioned the satellite functionality and the fact that you can use that for roadside assistance. Is one thing that you can use it for now. I think in the US, obviously, it hasn't come to the UK, but it's quite a cool thing.
Yeah.
That if you're stranded and you can't call anyone, your usual kind of roadside assistance membership, you can use the satellites to call them for you, and it says that it comes for free for 2 years in the US at least to call AAA out via satellite, which is wild.
They mentioned satellite access. I think was for those other regions was 12 months free, but that wasn't the roadside assistance piece. That was purely the satellite calls, which is interesting because they didn't mention a pricing model or anything like that when they talked about it. So I don't quite know what that'll cost after that if you want to have that facility, whether it be part of one of the different Apple One memberships that you could buy, but who knows.
And then I guess the main thing was the USB-C, which, as you rightly said, they really glossed over that. And as we all, for anyone who hasn't been watching the news or anything, the reason that Apple are having to do this is because of EU regulations. They've been forced now to adopt the Type-C charging port. And, I was expecting them to spin it in some kind of Apple way, as that we've decided to do this and added all these features, which in some ways, when we get to the Pro, they kind of have. But on the normal iPhone, they really glossed over it. They talked about, I guess, how it can work with some of your other accessories that work with your iPad, because, they've had other devices that have had Type-C for a long time. But also glossing over the fact that now they've also introduced the Apple AirPods Pro 2 with a Type-C case, which it didn't have before. So these features of being able to charge other cases and things like that, or using Type-C on those devices, they really, really glossed over those quite quickly, which I thought was quite funny. Given that they know that they've been forced into it.
And I think that's fine, isn't it? I mean, how else would they have approached it? I mean, you wouldn't want them to stand there and have to go, due to legal battles in Europe, we have changed this in your device, because there's no need, is there?
Yeah.
But equally, like you said, they didn't try to turn it into something. We proactively made this decision, and I'll be interested in your perspective when we come to the next phone, because I thought they did a good job of calling out the benefits, but I don't think at any point I felt like they were trying to make it sound like their decision. Yeah. They definitely avoided saying it was somebody else's. So difficult PR message, isn't it, that one?
I the other thing that they could have done, which would have been quite good, is just be self-aware about it and make a little joke, because I've seen them do that self-deprecating jokes before, like when I think earlier in the year when they chatted about the iPad OS update, and now it's able to do multiple timers, which is always a big criticism of their timer app not being able to do multiple times, and they did a little joke
about. It's a bit different, though, isn't it? Because this is they've lost a legal battle and had to submit to this.
True.
Whereas the other ones were
a bit less
absolutely
funny,
their choice. Yeah, exactly. They're probably not smiling about it. It's probably cost them a fortune to fight and lose that battle. So 15, I think overall, if that's the kind of model that you're purchasing, if you're buying a standard iPhone, it's got some really nice stuff in it. A really competent phone,
great
and
phone.
Not bad price, to be honest. $799 for the entry level model, and the camera you're getting with that is excellent.
Thing,
I think. Oh yeah, go on.
It's rare these days to pay for a phone that's expensive and doesn't have an increased frame rate on the phone. That was one of the criticisms I've seen. It's wild in 2023 that it's still 60 hertz display and not higher than that.
I saw a comparison video on that today as well that was kind of poo-pooing why that's such a not a big deal. Someone was comparing it to phones that have 120 hertz, but then showing that there was some, that even then on the 120 hertz phone, the animations weren't as good. It was something to do with, I can't remember what the technical element was, but there's something else about the way that it's engineered that makes the anyway. I'm not going to get into it.
But you can tell on your between like your iPad compared to your phone, which your iPad's got ProMotion. In fact, your iPhone has ProMotion.
You can tell, can you? I can't tell.
You can't tell.
I didn't know. No, I didn't know that.
Oh.
Right, let's get into the 15 Pro then, because this is the one that I was waiting for. So, for transparency, I'm on a 12 Pro. I've been trying to eke it out for a sort of a 3-year period just to get over the line for an upgrade. So I was highly likely to be upgrading to this. I will tell you at the end what decision I have made as to what I've gone for. But my expectation was going into this, I'd probably be going for the 15 Pro. So I was quite keen to hear what they were going to do with it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting anything radical, and I'd stayed away from any leaks. So I wasn't going in expecting something crazy that then didn't come about.
I watched tons of leaks. I was super excited for this.
Did you? Okay, well, I'll be interested to see whether this measured up. So let's just go through some of the basic stuff first of all, and we'll get into your opinion on it. So,
cool.
Titanium design was the big thing. So They made a big fuss about this. The most premium material they've ever used in an iPhone enclosure. It's the lightest Pro model they've ever made. Thinnest border, so it's actually slightly smaller than the normal iPhone, but the screen is the same size. So it's ever so slightly smaller and lighter without any compromises. Apparently it has the toughest glass in the industry. It comes in the same sizes as the Pro and, as the Standard and the Plus in the Pro and the Pro Max, which is 6.1 and 6.7 inches. Apparently the titanium is exactly the same grade 5, as was used in the Mars rover.
Yeah.
Not that I plan to send my phone to
Love
space.
those stats.
But that's a nice little thing for those who care. 4 new colours. I thought they were very subtly different. We'll come on to that in a minute. Key hardware change, I guess, is the removal for the first time in an iPhone, I guess, going all the way back to the original iPhone, of the silent switch, which has always existed ever since the original. It's now been replaced by a single button, much like the Ultra has its action button. This button can be configured to do other things, which I really like. And I do use the action button a lot on my watch. And I'm already thinking about how I might choose to use that on the phone. So an interesting hardware change. I guess it also probably just gives them more options in terms of how people use their device. And I'll be honest, the only time my volume switcher ever gets changed is when I pop it in or out of the case, very, very rarely, because it catches on the case as I do it. That's the only time I never, ever choose to turn it off silent. My phone lives on silent. Anyway.
Same.
So that's in there as well. We have the A17 Pro chip with a load of stats, which I'll let you recount. So I started writing some of them down, like 19 billion transistors, and I was like, I can't comprehend that figure. 19 billion of anything packed into a device that size, my brain cannot compute. But we can talk about that in a second. And I did write down the words, so many tech things. I hope Robbie got it all. USB-C connector, and it's the first iPhone with USB 3 speeds. They did mention a few things, which I'll come on to with the photography piece in a moment, about what that can do. So we'll perhaps hold that for a second, because the photography thing probably needs its own deep dive, I think. They said it was more power efficient hardware. They had a new GPU with Apple shader design and a Pro Class 6 core design. I don't know what that means. They mentioned AR experiences very quickly. Gearing these phones up to combine with the Vision Pro was kind of my question mark, which they further emphasised later on. Then they got really into gaming, which I thought was a bit odd when they were talking about the Pro device. And they really pushed heavily on some new games and experiences coming to the device. So they talked about a new Division experience called Resurgence from Ubisoft, which looked very impressive for a smartphone. Resident Evil Village being able to run on the phone, which I thought was incredible. And Resident Evil 4. And then they also talked about the brand new Assassin's Creed Mirage coming to the iPhone.
Yep.
And I put the question for you here, and perhaps we'll pause for a second on the camera stuff, was does this put this up there as a genuine gaming device competing with the Stream Deck, etc.? Because I'll tell you now, the Nintendo Switch will not be running Assassin's Creed Mirage. I don't know if you saw the recent videos of Mortal Kombat 1 running on the Switch. They are incredibly funny.
Oh dear.
You need to go and look that out. It looks awful. But yeah, so let's just pause on, because there's a whole section on the camera, which we'll get into. But in terms of the hardware and the gaming thing, what did you think of the 15 Pro?
Okay, so starting with the titanium, I really love the look of titanium, and I think the main reason they brought this in is for the weight, to reduce the weight, because I have the 14 Pro Max, which is very heavy, and this is supposed to be noticeably lighter, which is, I love that. I think that's really good. In terms of durability, I'm not so sure. I've seen conflicting things online. I think the metal itself is probably durable, but a lot of concerns about how the paint on top is going to fare. Though, given the way that it's been treated, might not be as secure as you'd like. So it's likely, for example, that if you get the blue one and you scratch it, it'll start to show the bare titanium underneath. A lot of people are recommending the raw titanium color, because if you do scratch that, it's not going to change color.
So interestingly, just on that, and we must have been watching similar or opposing
Probably.
Twitter feeds. I saw something about that where someone was trying to dispel that very problem by saying that the paint, it's not actually painted, that color is baked into the titanium, so that it can't flake off and chip off. That it's actually that color is sort of fused into the metal. Now I don't know whether that's right or not, but I guess just as a counterpoint, because I had read what you'd read about the paints and its durability, and then there was this counter post that said that's not the case, that actually it's fused into the metal. Now neither of those were Apple, so who knows.
True.
But yeah, I think it's worth calling out just in case. I don't want us to put something out there that's factually incorrect and then find that
No, it's fair.
we look daft. So there has been some opposing thoughts on that, but if it's true and you're correct, then yeah, that would be a concern.
Overall, though, I really dig the design. I think it's awesome. I like the curved edges as well. A bit easier to hold in the hand. I mean, I throw it in a case as soon as I get a phone, so I probably won't feel the benefits of it. But I know a lot of people that complain about the sharp edges of previous devices when they were not wearing a case on it. That and the brushed look looks awesome. Look really cool. Of the titanium, and then the weight, as I mentioned, is really cool. I mean, I do wonder how they choose the materials for this. The fact that it's the same titanium that was on the Mars rover. I wonder if there's just some kind of catalog that they get handed of materials, and it's like they get their own marketing brochures for the materials that they're buying from their suppliers, and it's like, this titanium was on the Mars rover. You can then put that in your marketing material and start to sell that to the people. And it's a similar, I think, with the recycled materials as well. There'll be a brochure of recycled materials instead of raw materials.
It's definitely novelty value, but it's still quite a cool thing to think, isn't it, though, that your phone is using that kind of grade material.
Yeah. It's got the cool factor for sure. Yeah. Love the action button. I think that's a great idea. I'm the same. I have mine constantly on silent, and I think they must have just listened to their customers who all do the same pretty much. And there will be people who use it, but not as much. And so they could sacrifice it for, if you still want to use it, you can have the action button to press it. But for those who don't, which I suspect is the majority of users, you can toggle it to be your own thing. What I thought was quite cool about this is the different actions that you can toggle it to do, which they didn't show too much on the actually, I think they went through the different ones, didn't they? There's things like launch your camera, launch a flashlight. The one that I found really interesting is you can launch any shortcut, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, that's the one I think that's captured the most the imagination, isn't it? That you can effectively use it to launch any app.
Yeah.
Or even something more complex.
Well, shortcuts it's basically like a development environment and sandbox. You can make your own shortcuts in there that can really push the boundaries of what's possible on your phone. For example, I think I talked a while ago about having ChatGPT built into my phone. Somebody developed a shortcut that calls out to the API and everything. You just have to put the key in. So really clever stuff that you can do if you do it in combination with the shortcut. So I love that. I think that's really clever. What else? So the new chip. Yes, lots of numbers were thrown about on here. It's a 3 nanometer chip. That's what they've said. Though people are a little skeptical. I think it might be 4 nanometers instead. Nanometers, I think, is basically the space between the transistors, I think. That's my understanding of it anyway. So the smaller the number, the more transistors it manages to fit on there. And also the shorter distance between the transmitters it has to communicate, so they tend to be more efficient. So the closer they are, the smaller the number, the more power efficient, the more efficient generally, and the more powerful it tends to be because you can fit more on it. So this is the first time they've done this in a phone, and I believe, looking online, I think this is the first time any phone has had a 3 nanometer chip. Any smartphone has used a 3 nanometer chip, so very actually quite technically brilliant, the fact that they've got this in the phone. A bunch of extra things in there they pointed out. In fact, I'm not sure they had on their website an image of the, how they show you the chip and then a few squares of what they represent.
Yeah, they did it in the video. They definitely showed kind of how it was being used and how it was being apportioned and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's on the website.
Like a bunch of extra graphics cores in there. They increased the speed of the high performance cores and the efficiency cores as well. So a much more powerful chip overall. I have to say, the other thing is they had that USB 3 controller on there, which I guess is why you don't get USB 3 speeds on the iPhone 15 because it doesn't have that controller to be able to enhance the speeds. So USB 3.1 on the iPhone 15 Pro and USB 2.0 on the iPhone 15 is quite a big difference between them. I did have to look it up just because I was interested. When USB 3 came out, and it came out, it was first announced I think in 2008. So it is quite an outdated, even now, port.
We don't have any replacement for it though, do we? Generally speaking, it's still the standard on most.
Generally. Thunderbolt is, but also Thunderbolt's proprietary to Intel. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think you have to pay Intel a bunch if you want to use their port. But yeah, I mean, quite good that it's got the USB 3 on there anyway. And they had a bunch of different features that you can use that for. We'll get onto it in the photography. But then my super exciting bit, and you rightly pointed out that I would be excited about this, the gaming on the phone that's now possible with the new chip. So all these extra cores, these GPU cores that they've put on there, means that they've now got a bunch of extra features that you can do with gaming. One of the things they mentioned is hardware accelerated ray tracing, which is crazy to think about on your phone. It was only
it is when I think about that being one of the big features that Xbox and PlayStation pimped out about their consoles 3 years ago when they launched the next gen.
Yeah.
And that has also been one of the reasons those things are so massive.
Yeah.
And then you've got Apple going, here's our lightest, most sort of, appealing form factor phone we've ever produced. It's exactly like the last one, but even smaller and lighter. And oh, by the way, we've got ray tracing. I thought,
crazy.
Yeah, look, how have you achieved that? It's incredible.
Insane. Yeah. But then when you think about what they're doing with their PCs, sorry, not their PCs, their MacBooks and their iPads, having this incredibly powerful hardware on there, the GPUs and CPU chips built in, the Apple Silicon, bringing it to the phone. I mean, they've done Apple Silicon on phones ever since the start, basically. But the fact that they're bringing gaming, that was so left field. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Especially in a presentation for a pro device. And I know that the gaming is not. That's not what it's about, but I just thought that's incredible. And it wasn't. I think I bemoaned on the conference over the summer where they talked about Death Stranding coming to Mac, and I was like, why the first one? Why not the second one that he's producing right now? You need to be on. You need to be at the forefront of the games that are coming out, not be releasing games that are already 4, 5, or more years old. So then when they mentioned Division, I thought, okay, cool. That's probably just a mobile version of the Division Resurgence, being a mobile version of the Division.
Yeah.
Which it probably will be to a degree, but it doesn't look any less impressive. Then they mentioned Resident Evil Village. I thought, well, okay, not the latest. And Resident Evil 4 Remaster. That is the most recent version of Resident Evil that's been released.
I'm playing on PC at the moment.
Well, yeah, and great game as far as I'm aware. And they've just brought, in fact, slightly off a tangent, PSVR 2 is now getting a Resi 4 VR mod. That's cool. But Assassin's Creed Mirage, that getting announced, it's not out yet. And so that sounds like it's going to be coming to the phone with relative parity to its console release. That's incredible.
Insane.
That's a big step forward from them in the gaming space.
One of the things they mentioned on there, which kind of nerded out a bit as well, is they've got metal effects upscaling as a new kind of feature on the phone as well, which is something that they use on the PC, or on the MacBook, to upscale the quality of the games that you're playing. So I think, for example, you could render it in 720 and it would upscale it to 1080p, for example, to upscale the resolution. But I think you can do things like that to the quality as well. So it's similar to what I understand of DLSS, which is what NVIDIA use on their graphics cards, which is a super popular feature for upscaling games on PCs. So to have that on your phone means that you can render things at a lower resolution and then use upscaling, the metal effects upscaling to improve the graphics through software, which is, again, just incredible on a phone that's 6.7 inches wide.
Right, isn't it? Well, that's at the biggest. You go 6.1 if you go even into the standard. So let's get onto the cameras then, because they spend a reasonable amount of time labouring on this, and for good reason. So the headline was 7 lenses in your pocket.
Equivalent.
Captured here.
Yeah.
Equivalent, yeah. And how they've achieved that, I think, is really clever. So again, we've got our 48 megapixel sensor, but it's more advanced this time. 24 megapixels are standard again for the main camera, but the main camera now has 3 lens options. So you can have, and this is more for photographers, but you can have the equivalent of a 24 millimeter lens, a 28 millimeter lens, or a 35 millimeter lens. And you can also change that with a simple click. So your sort of standard one-time zoom button will now toggle between 1, 1.2, and 1.5. You can also set, I saw after the event, that the default preference in your camera settings, so that every time you use the camera, if you prefer a 1.2, or therefore the equivalent of a 28 millimeter lens, you can have that as your default. So you can change which of those 3 your phone defaults to. That's really impressive. They talked about LiDAR being used to create incredible night photographs, and you mentioned earlier the multi-layering of the images and the different exposures to achieve those high dynamic range pictures. Then they talked about zoom range. Now, this is where I thought they were a little bit sneaky. So zoom range, there is, as was rumoured, the optical zoom, the 5 times optical zoom, the equivalent of 120 millimeter focal length within a 2.8 aperture, which is incredible for a phone. And how it was achieved, I don't think, did I actually write down the words that they used?
Tetraprism.
No, I didn't. Yeah, the tetraprism, it looked amazing. Now, the only sticking point here is that is only available in the Max. And they didn't say that. They didn't express it. They kind of, there was one single sentence where they hinted, but they weren't kind of, they weren't as direct as I would perhaps like them to be, or to be specific to say that was only a feature available on the Max. And they didn't also therefore justify why. The assumption kind of in the press is that it's the size of the phone and the size of the space needed to take on this tetraprism hardware, but they didn't actually call it out. So for those who are interested in the Pro devices who've perhaps watched it, done a bit of reading post and maybe have missed this, if you're interested in the telephoto lens, it is only available in the Max, the Pro Max.
Yep.
So if you order the Pro, you're not going to get the telephoto lens. So that's definitely something to look out for. A couple of other things they mentioned. So I think the 7th lens then to complete the family of lenses was the macro photography, which was going to bring in amazing versatility in macro photography, which is great. Then a couple of things which I assume are down to the USB-C port and USB 3. They mentioned the ability to shoot and record direct to laptops or external drives. So I think photography-wise, you'll be able to live shoot directly to your MacBook, which I've done on DSLRs before in the past, and it's really good. Being able to shoot straight into Lightroom, there's a lot of benefits if you're doing studio photography. And then they also talked about video being able to be recorded directly to external drives, compatible external drives.
Yeah.
So again, if you're doing a lot of filming, you can push it all direct to the external drive. And I guess there's two benefits to that. One is it gets it off your device and onto the device, onto perhaps an easier to access device in terms of them being able to pick it up and edit it. But also if you've then got, depending on what size of storage you've chosen, if you're short of space, you don't have to worry about these now huge video files being absorbing all of that. They did mention as well that would be able to push video up to 4K 60 frames a second, I think, through that. So that is pretty incredible.
As well. Yeah.
At ProRes. They also mentioned now a new filmmaker standard I'd never heard of for color grading, which was ACES, which stood for something along the lines of Academy, I think. Anyway, but so there's now some sort of color grading standard built in. That was kind of it on the camera. There was one final bit that I wanted to mention, which was the thing I texted you about, and I don't know if you picked up on it when you watched it back. And I said this back on our podcasting when their Vision Pro was announced. They mentioned right at the end, and actually a surprising number of people missed this, that the Vision Pro 3D spatial video, the ability to capture that was going to be coming to these devices as well.
Yep.
And that effectively requires you to turn the phone, so it can only be, from what I can tell, done in landscape.
Yeah.
And it utilizes the two lenses side by side to capture presumably two images, which it then uses to create that 3D kind of spatial effect, which will then be playable in your Vision Pro headset, allowing you to, I guess in a more immersive way, experience that video and play it back in a 3D way. And the reason that I got so excited when that was announced was, one, because it's cool and it gives you a more compelling reason to buy a Vision Pro, but two, I think I said exactly that in our podcast when it was launched, that had to be something that was coming, because there was no way people were going to wear those headsets to special family moments and watch their kids blow out their candles on their 5th birthday wearing their goggles, in order to capture it in that way. So I wasn't expecting it to come this soon. I figured it would probably come in an iteration of the phone after the headset had released. But actually it makes perfect sense to release it now, because there'll be a whole load of enthusiasts with too much money. I don't have the too much money bit. I'm the enthusiast who will find the money, who are going to be capturing these videos and then are going to have them stored in their phones, ready to play these things back in fantastic spatial 3D. So that was really interesting to me. The last things they mentioned then, which are kind of less about the device, more about the price, were Pro starting at $999 and the Max at $1199. They also mentioned that iCloud Plus was getting a bump, so it was going to go from up to 6 terabytes and a 12 terabyte storage option, which I think a lot of people got excited about. Well, so I actually wrote the opposite. I put no mention of the family plan, ... because I have the family plan and I have 2 terabytes across the family plan. which is we have like Apple One Premium, whatever it is, and
Mm.
it's part of it. And all of our devices, so my wife and two children, their devices, iPads, phones, everything, back up to that cloud and store all of their pictures and videos.
Yeah.
So we do use it. Now we're not at the 2 terabyte point yet. But again, if you're going to then put super fancy cameras and video recording into these devices and spatial video and God knows what else, you're only going to need more and more storage, aren't you? So I was a bit surprised that they didn't mention the family plans. Maybe it's just going to come as part of it. It'll be a no-brainer that you'll be able to do that. But yeah, so lots of stuff in the cameras.
Yeah.
What did you make of the 15 Pro's camera capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked the implementation of the telephoto. It's a different one than what we've seen in the past. From what I've seen, like the actual hardware itself, the prism method is not something I've seen before. It's usually, kind of a angled on a corner. I don't know what you call it, little telescope thing that you get in submarines, like that kind of effect.
Periscope.
Periscope, that's the word I'm looking for. That's what it's called, periscope lens. Not that, which I think is interesting. It's like it's a very Apple thing to do. It's completely different to what everyone else is doing for those kind of zooms. It also is supposed to bring it closer, the sensor closer to the lens, which is supposed to help with low light as well, which I think is one of the downfalls of the other implementation. So quite cool that that's brought. It's disappointing that is only the Pro Max though, not the Pro. I don't know if Apple have ever done this before, where they've had such different features or quite a different feature to the Pro Max before. I don't know if you remember anything like that.
There was. I'm struggling to remember the specifics, but there definitely was a case a few years back where the Pro Max had something that the equivalent, sorry, the Plus. I think this was pre-Pro. Plus had something that the standard didn't. I can't remember what it was, and it obviously didn't bother me enough to make me buy one. I've never bought bigger than the standard device, so I don't know what it was, but it wouldn't have been quite as significant as this. And I think the Pro is still getting a decent zoom lens, but I think it's only 3 times zoom. Is that right?
I think they're all 3. I think they're all 3 times zoom now.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, it's not getting the uplift. It's not getting anything fancier than
the 15. Yeah. I think the focal length is an interesting thing. I'm not sure I quite get the benefit. What's the you can set it as a default, the different focal lengths going in, but what's the difference just tapping on the 1x thing and it would just cycle between them? I don't really.
I think it's more for hardcore photographers, because those lens standards are sort of typical preferences for standard photography sort of setup. So it's probably more about preference.
Fair. And
I think it affects the kind of the bokeh and the focal length. I'm not sure it's something that either of us are going to be particularly well qualified to talk about, but I know that for photographers who want a certain look or style or always shoot in a certain way, I guess it's giving you a sort of a slightly better crop as well. So if you're taking a lot of pictures of people, then it's going to crop you in that little bit closer to your subject instantly without you having to kind of go and then kind of fiddle around. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see how much it gets used.
Fair.
There must be a reason why they've implemented it, because it is a slightly strange one to implement, to have that sort of 3 option toggle. So I can only assume they've been getting requests for something like it. I don't know. Or they've analysed data to see what the common kind of focal length people shoot at is. I don't know.
Maybe it's the fact with the new lens, because it is a new kind of main lens as well, isn't it? It's supposed to be a bigger sensor, still 48 megapixel. I think so. Maybe it's something to do with that lens that's slightly more zoomed out than usual as well, so it's given the option to set it.
We didn't mention obviously the 7th lens. Sorry, was the ultra wide. I didn't write that one down because that doesn't appear to have changed. It's the same ultra wide that's kind of there now. Yeah. But obviously you've still got that capability as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the 7 camera equivalent, a lot of those are in software, right? So the macro lens, it's not a lens. I think you use the ultra wide for the macro photography, and just because it brings in the most light. I know a lot of other phones, for example, do that. They just use the ultra wide lens to use for macro photography, but software.
Yeah, I don't know how the macro one works, because if you were to buy, like if you're buying a camera lens, you can buy specific macro lenses. That obviously is designed to deal with. So macros that you usually do, obviously you want to get quite close to your subject. You're taking pictures of very small things. Yeah, I don't know which lens they're using to do that, but as you said, perhaps it's the telephoto and then just doing a really high crop on it or something. I don't know. It'll be interesting to know. Maybe it's even a combination.
Yeah, might be.
Images snapped from different lenses, because the spatial video sort of shows that that's clearly achievable.
Yeah.
That they're able to capture multiple feeds from multiple lenses and then do clever stitching.
True. I really like the recording through the USB-C onto other devices. I think that's really clever, and especially with the size of the files that you get from ProRes video and photos, I think that's going to be huge for anyone who's using it for semi-professional, professional photography and filmmaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, very cool usage of the USB 3 port as well. And yeah, the spatial videos. You don't have to use your stupid Vision Pro face to record these spatial videos, which is a relief, I think, because that would be, again, you wouldn't put it on for these treasured moments, would you? It's so it puts that degree of separation between you and the actual moment itself, which I don't think anybody really wants to do. So yeah, quite relieved that they brought that to the phone. I think that's quite a cool idea.
And for those, I mean, this is more for my interest, but it relevant to the audience. I watched it real time. You watched it back sort of slightly after I had. And I text you without any kind of detail as to what I was texting you about, simply saying, I said it, I called it, something to that effect. Did you know? How long did it take you to work out what I was referencing?
As soon as they said
heard it?
As soon as they said it, yeah. I knew that was the thing that you hated the most, was like recording these treasured moments with, big boxing.
It was more the fact that even in the video as I presented the headset, it just looked derpy. Like there was no way you were going to do it. So it made perfect sense that we're going to bring it to the phones. So, all in all, I think the 15 Pro is a pretty incredible piece of hardware. A lot of stick in the press, same form factor. Apple's run out of ideas, all that kind of stuff. Is some of the radical headlines I've seen. I think there's a lot in there to like. If you're looking for a different form factor, then you're probably in the wrong place. Will Apple ever do a flip phone? At this point, I don't know. Interestingly, I was watching Mr. Who's the Boss on YouTube. I don't know if you watch him. And he'd pivoted, he'd moved off his iPhone for the first time in years and gone to the Samsung Flip because he was so impressed with it. And
I know that was your favorite as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was. And then he did a video berating the experience, just saying that actually in everyday use, it just doesn't. It's just a pain. And I think he'll be moving back over, which is unfortunate because I did genuinely like that phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an example of someone there using it in everyday life who's gotten used to an iPhone, who's tried to try something different, and it's for various very good reasons, I will say, not just kind of like Apple fanboy, I want to go back to Apple.
One
there were
day
genuinely
Apple do
some
it.
good reasons. Yeah, there were genuinely some good reasons in there as to why he was frustrated. But worth a watch. So, Robbie, I will tell you what I ordered in a minute.
Oh, you did order then?
I have placed an order. But as I said, I was always going to upgrade. So I was kind of in that upgrade cycle. It was my battery now on my phone is getting to be very poor. So it's a necessity for me. But how has the event left you feeling? Because I know you're a serial upgrader.
Yeah.
Have you got an itch, or are you comfortable to wait till the next one?
I do have an itch. I think it's the Type C that is the main thing that I would quite like, and I would be going for the Pro Max as well. So I'm quite interested in the camera. The only reason I would entertain this idea is I do have the switch up program with O2, which means I can upgrade for free at any time. And I feel like if it hadn't been Type C, or if I hadn't done this many kind of changes, I probably wouldn't. The other thing that's got me quite excited is the gaming. I'd love to give that a try. So there's a few things that has made me very tempted. I haven't looked into it. I haven't ordered anything yet, but I might be looking to upgrade at some point. Yeah. Watch-wise as well, absolutely not. There's nothing there that really excites me. I'm on the last year's watch, so really hasn't done anything for me.
So I have ordered.
Nice.
So there was a pre-order, which I did think was quite funny. So Apple on Wednesday emailed everyone saying, set your order up now. Basically do everything but click confirm, so that on Friday, when they release their pre-orders, you could just click confirm and it would be all done. To try and sort of remove some of that friction to getting your order placed. So it was things like, if you were having it on like a finance scheme, you could pre-approve that and get it all kind of checked in.
Okay.
You could make your choices and all that good stuff. So I did that on the Wednesday. I clicked and checked out on Friday, and my new device is due. I think it's sometime around mid-October. I went for the 1 terabyte titanium Pro Max.
Whoa. You went for the 1 terabyte?
Mm-hmm.
What?
So I have the 1 terabyte iPad Pro. That was my choice, because predominantly for me it's the graphics, the filmmaking, the video editing, that kind of side of the appeal. And I decided, looking at the phone, I thought, well, things like Assassin's Creed Mirage are not going to be small file sizes if I choose to dabble with the gaming.
I was thinking that.
Before the announcement, I was toying with the idea of a Max just because I wanted something that felt a bit different. I kind of got bored of the iPhone upgrade syndrome where you kind of go, wow, new phone, unbox it, and then you restore your backup, and then you go, oh, it just feels like the last one. So I haven't ordered a case. I haven't ordered a new wallet or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with what I'm going to go caseless to start with.
Caseless. Whoa,
know, which I wouldn't normally do, but I thought.
So you didn't go for the Pro Max? You went for the Pro?
Pro Max.
Yeah,
I went for the Pro Max this time.
Wow,
yeah, so
okay.
like I was going to say, I contemplated something bigger before the announcement, just to feel that definitely just felt different. I'm doing a lot more commuting at the moment, so it might be good to watch kind of content on while I'm traveling. But with the cameras and everything, just having the bigger screen would be nice.
Yeah.
So I have ordered the Max. Went for the maximum storage size. To be honest, because there wasn't a lot in it. It wasn't a significant price hike. I've chosen to do it monthly over 24 months, just for anyone who cares about my finances. And actually, the difference over the course of a month, it was a few pounds. And I thought, well, actually, do you know what? For a couple of pounds, I'd rather have the maximum capacity that I could have than if I want to fill it with videos, fill it with content. If I'm going to use it more as a media device, that gives me more flexibility. I can fill it with videos, pictures, etc. And I want to take more of those sorts of things as well. So I'm going to try and use it, and I really benefit from some of those camera upgrades. I'm going caseless for now.
What colour did you go for?
Natural titanium.
Okay. So you won't be affected if there is any scratching issues. You'll be all right.
That's not why I did it. I did it because I wasn't quite sure what to go for. I'd had blue this year, but obviously never seen it because the case wasn't on. And I thought, actually, if I end up putting a case on, who cares? So I just decided to go for the natural one because Marcus Brownlee said it was the one he liked the most, and he's the only person I've listened to who's seen one in person. So I thought, I'll take it. I'll run with that as advice. I don't really care because the chances are I'll slap it in a case anyway. It doesn't really matter to me. But I have decided not to purchase a case for now, just to see how I get on. Because if it's lighter, the other thing I did, because I am mindful that I've bought the bigger screen, biggest device, I'm not putting a case on it. And for an extra couple of pounds, I also bought Apple Care, which I don't normally do. But I thought in this instance, if I did then have an accident, break it, smash it, kids do something to it, I can replace it without having to worry. So
you're going to put a screen protector on?
I don't normally. I haven't with this device. No, I haven't had one on my current phone, and I've never scratched it. And actually, that was the other interesting thing. I will say to Apple's credit, bearing in mind my 12, this isn't like the biggest capacity. I think my 12's in like 128 gig. I've got £325 cash back, I think, as part of my trading.
Oh wow!
Which I thought was really quite reasonable for a phone that's 3 years old.
That is pretty good.
Yeah. So again, my phone actually is costing me less a month than my wife's is, and she had a 512 Pro Max, 14 Pro, sorry, and I've got 1 terabyte Pro Max, and I'm paying out less. So anyway, that's what I went for. So I thought I thought I'd save that till the end because I hadn't told you previously what I'd gone for. So it's due in October. Apparently the Maxes there is a longer lead time on.
Yeah.
So it's due something like the 10th to the 16th, something like that, or 16th to 22nd. I can't quite remember. So when it arrives, I'm sure we'll spend a little bit of time on an episode talking about it, sharing our thoughts. And like I said, if you choose to upgrade as well, then we can obviously do a bit of a comparison. If not, then I'll happily answer any questions once I've got my head around it. But yeah, looking forward to it. I'm excited to have a new phone.
A big phone
It's been a few years. Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit different. I'm kind of looking at all my accessories that I've got around the house that old phones going, is that going to fit my phone? Is that going to fit my phone? Is that, oh my God, is that going to fit my phone? But yeah, so I guess after all of that, the summary for me is I've plumped for the iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Nice.
And I'm really, really excited to get it, yeah, and just to have something a bit different that's got, I'm looking forward to the camera stuff. I'm going to try and take more pictures. I'll try and use it a little bit more. Perhaps we can have a discussion about it, a month or two down the line to see how much use I'm getting out of that and whether I am benefiting and what the telephoto lens and stuff is like, etc.
Yeah.
And gaming, when we get some of these releases that have been teased, just to see what they're like. I'm sure I'll pick one of those up and pair one of the many pads that the iPhone now supports with it and give it a go as a gaming device. Nice. We'll see how it plays.
Exciting.
Any last thoughts from you, Robbie, before we wrap this one up?
I think we've covered a lot there. Overall, an all right event. Not crazy changes among the devices, except the 15 Pro Max, I think, has the most exciting. Just the gaming. Can't wait.
I agree. I thought the Apple Watch was very, very sort of here. Nothing too much to say. I thought the video was entertaining, and like I said, we talked about the controversy around that. The 15 is a very competent standard phone if that's what you're looking for. And again, I think if you're in an upgrade cycle and you're waiting for the next thing, great. I don't have a 14, but I would guess if you were on the 14, there probably wasn't much reason to jump. And any of them, frankly, if maybe the 15 Pro giving the most reason for a sort of real tech enthusiast to upgrade. And I know that you're keen for all the reasons we've talked about. So I think the 15 Pro was probably the most exciting thing in the presentation, and is doing the most in terms of pushing the boundaries on the tech front, even if to sort of like the non-initiated or the non-technical, it doesn't look like a lot from the outside. Because I will admit, as hardware goes, it doesn't look radically different. But if you understand what it's doing, I think that's where the excitement comes in. And you've got to be a bit like us to really benefit from or get enthusiastic about that, haven't you, really? There's a certain type of person who's going to enjoy that, and a lot of people who won't care. Who will just buy the standard and think it's a good phone. Yeah. So I think that's it. Fab, well, that's all for this episode. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you're still here now, I'm sure we've crashed through the hour as we often do. Then thank you very much for doing that. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube if that's where you're watching, or on all good podcast services as well. It really does help us out. We will be getting back to doing some game streaming soon as well, so you'll be able to check that out on YouTube also. So again, well worth a subscription if you haven't done so already. Please do tell other people about this, share it around, if you enjoy what we do, and we will see you for episode 36.